All right, everyone. We're going to let some folks trickle in, and I'm going to get closed captioning set up. So it may just be a minute. We do welcome you to this session. But yeah, we'll let folks kind of trickle in. Sometimes it takes a minute or two. And we do know it's lunchtime, so if you all are still gathering your food for lunch, that's perfect. Okay. All right, I do want to welcome everyone. My name is Tracy Stout. I am the current chair of the Missouri A&OER Conference Planning Committee. So we definitely welcome you. We do have live captioning during this session. You can toggle this on and off using the attendee controls at the bottom of your screen. The session is being recorded, and we'll provide you the link to this probably in about a week. And it will be on the conference website. Please enter all your questions into the Q&A box, and we will answer these at the end as best we can. We do encourage you to engage with other attendees using the chat feature, though. It's been really fun to see everybody interact. So definitely use that chat feature. So now, with great pleasure, I'm happy to introduce Amy Wolfe as our keynote presenter for this year's conference. Amy is an accessibility librarian and OER developer at the City University of New York. Amy brings a unique blend of technical expertise and pedagogical insight into her work. She has developed the Accessibility Toolkit for Open Educational Resources, a resource for creating accessible OER, and she is committed to empowering librarians and educators to prioritize accessibility in their work. So again, with great pleasure, I turn things over to Amy.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for that introduction, Tracy. As Tracy said, my name is Amy Wolfe, and I am an accessibility librarian and an open educational resources developer at the City University of New York, CUNY. For those of you who cannot visually see me, I want to provide a visual description of myself. I'm a white woman with long brown hair, wearing a blue shirt, glasses, and with a blurred background. During my presentation, I'll be turning off my camera, and my online presentation avatar is a laptop keyboard upon which a pair of glasses lay, with a cup of coffee and a stack of books in the background. It sums me up perfectly. Um, Before I get into the heart of my talk, I did want to take a moment to thank the conference organizers for inviting me to speak to you at your conference, where you're centering accessibility and inclusive pedagogy within OER. And I also wanted to thank the sponsors for sponsoring this conference. I believe including accessibility and accessibility considerations into all conversations in education, libraries, everywhere, to be honest, is so important. My hope is to broaden your thoughts on accessibility, to inspire you, and to show you why it matters to incorporate accessibility throughout your OER creation. Let's see. There we go. Yay, it worked. I've added a few specific accessibility components to this presentation I wanted to point out. I've added a slide transition sound to this presentation. This way, if you're not able to visually see the presentations and you would like to know when a slide changes, you will hear a sound. It's sort of my layperson's attempt at incorporating in my own pared down DIY remixed way the idea of sonification, taken from data sonification, And for those of you who don't know what that is, data sonification is a way to provide an auditory representation of data and allows researchers, scientists, and individuals to use their sense of hearing to interpret and analyze complex data sets. I'm also going to start this presentation out with an outline to help you orient yourself and give you an idea of what I'm going to share and what is coming up. Here we go. I'm now going to turn off my camera for the heart of the presentation, but I will turn it back on when we do the question and discussion section. Okay, let's get into the presentation and learn why accessibility matters in OER. Okay. Here's a broad outline of my presentation so you can see what I'm going to discuss and how things are connected. To start off I'm going to begin with the conference theme and how it influenced what I wanted to discuss. Next, we'll broaden the conversation with some overall statistics about disability in the U.S., helping us ground our conversation in the reality of who some of our OER users, learners, and teachers are. With that grounding in place, I'll move into a brief overview of the ADA, including upcoming Title II updates and how those changes shape digital accessibility and, by extension, OER. From there, we'll explore the four core accessibility principles known as POUR. Building on these principles, I'll introduce the 7 principles of universal design, followed by the frameworks of universal design for learning, which apply accessibility and design thinking directly to the learning environments and OER. After establishing these frameworks, we'll shift to the deeper why, the ethical, human, and inclusive reasons that accessibility matters in OER. This includes the belief in the human right to information, perspective from Tim Berners-Lee, core values of the global OER movement, principles embedded in the UN Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and reflection from learners, educators, and users with disabilities about education and removing barriers. Once these connections are made, we'll turn to the 5 R's of OER and how they intersect with accessibility. Finally, we'll bring all of these pieces together, looking at how they relate to one another and how to think about them holistically when creating your OER. Before I dive into the details of accessibility in OER, I want to pause for a moment on the conference theme itself, because it truly sets the foundation for everything we'll explore today. What I appreciate most about this theme is that it doesn't treat accessibility as an add-on. It treats accessibility as something essential, something built into equitable, inclusive learning from the very beginning. When the committee reached out to me about giving this keynote, I was excited for the chance to talk about my deep belief in the importance of accessibility in OER, in libraries, and education more broadly. This is really my why. This conference theme highlights how inclusive teaching practices and intentional design create equitable learning environments where all students can succeed. By focusing on the intersection of open education, accessibility, universal design, and universal design for learning, it centers belonging as a core part of teaching and curriculum creation, something I believe is fundamental to OER. Now for some statistics. According to the CDC, about 1 in 4 adults in the United States has some type of disability. The CDC estimates that approximately, 50 million people report having a disability in the US, and most Americans will experience a disability at some point in their lives. Disabilities can be physical, cognitive, and they may be visible or invisible. The last part, that's important. This infographic shows a breakdown of disability types among U.S. adults. 13.9% have a cognition disability involving serious difficulty in concentrating, remembering, or making decisions. 12.2% have a mobility disability affecting such things as walking, climbing stairs, or using a mouse with their computer. 7.7% have an independent living disability involving difficulty doing errands alone. 6.2% are deaf or have serious difficulty hearing. And 5.5% have a vision disability, even when wearing glasses. It's also important to remember that the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act, under the ADA, a disability is a legal definition and not a medical one. Because of this, the ADA definition differs from definitions used for medical reasons or for Social Security contexts. Now, before going further, though I'm not a lawyer, I want to briefly touch on the legal landscape because it helps explain why creating accessible OER is not optional. Accessibility requirements in the US stem from the Americans with Disability Act, which I was just talking about, the civil rights laws, including Section 504 and Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act. These laws establish the expectation that people with disabilities must have equal access to information and digital content. Title II of the ADA, which applies to state and local governments, including public universities and colleges, prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities. Initially, Title II focused primarily on the physical spaces, but the updated regulations, which go into effect in April, now make clear that it also applies to the digital environments, including online learning materials and digital content. Because most OER live in digital spaces, ensuring accessibility isn't just good practice, it is a legal requirement for public institutions. In higher education, the Title II digital accessibility rules has direct implications for the colleges and universities that are considered public entities. These institutions now must ensure that their websites, online learning platforms, course materials, documents, videos, even social media posts are accessible to all users, including people with disabilities. Failure to comply with the Title II can lead to legal challenges. And beyond the legal consequences, inaccessible digital content creates barriers that exclude learners from full participation in their education. Digital accessibility simply means designing and developing electronic materials like OER so that they can be used by everyone. Since OER are created, shared, and used almost entirely online, accessibility must be built into them from the start. So now some accessibility principles. The four main aspects of digital accessibility have been broken down into the acronym POUR. POUR stands for perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. First, we have perceivable. This means that students must be able to access and interpret your content, whether visually, audibly, or through assistive technology. One example is to provide text alternatives for any non-text content, like images, photos, graphs, videos, etc., so that it can be changed into other forms people need, such as large print, braille, speech, symbols, and simpler language. Remixing, if you will. Operable, the O, your OER course materials should be easy to navigate using different tools, including a keyboard or assistive technology. Understandable, the U. It should be easy for students to learn how to use and navigate your OER, Provide consistent structure within your OER so students know where to find information and move about your course. And the R, robust. This means students are able to access your OER using various devices and technologies without losing understanding or meaning. Can a student understand your OER if they're using a screen reader? Do you make sure to not convey meaning and information only with color? These are important considerations. I'm now going to, we're going to say try because we hope it works, play a 2-minute video created by the UK Government Digital Services where they explain POUR, because I think they do it really well. While he's talking, think about the OER that you create and do they follow the POUR principles? Okay, fingers crossed, everybody. Here we go. The beginning is silent. Then you'll hear him speaking.
For a digital service to be accessible, there are 4 things that need to happen. So somebody needs to be able to perceive the content. That means that that content is available to at least one of their senses. So if you have a visual impairment, can you see it because you can make it large enough? Is there good color contrast? If you're blind, does your screen reader work with the content and read it out to you? If you're deaf, and there's some audio, is there a text representation that you can read instead of listen to? The other thing that needs to happen is that somebody needs to be able to operate the website or the interface. So not everybody uses a mouse. Some people may have a mobility impairment that means that they're forced to use a keyboard or may use speech recognition software. If a service doesn't work with the input device that somebody is using, they're not going to be able to go to the page that they want to go to or submit the information that they need to submit. You also need to be able to understand the content. So it's all very well you receiving that content, but if you can't understand it, then you won't be able to do what you need to do. So people have a range of cognitive abilities. Some people may struggle to read due to dyslexia, maybe on the autistic spectrum. Using things like clear and simple language that is easy to understand, making sure that interfaces are consistent and predictable are really important to making sure that somebody can understand the content and how to use your service. The last bit is that it needs to be robust, and that means that it's been built in such a way that it's compatible with the technologies that people are using. So if somebody is using a screen reader, does it work with that screen reader? If somebody's using an older browser, does it work with that older browser? If any one of those 4 things don't work, then somebody won't be able to have a successful interaction and complete the task that they're trying to do.
All righty. So now we're going to talk about universal design and the 7 universal design principles. You'll notice that some of these universal design principles sound very similar to the POUR principles you were just learning about. A bit about the term universal design. Ron Mace, the gentleman pictured here, is an American architect, product designer, educator, and is credited with coining the term universal design in 1985. He said, universal design is design that's usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without the need for adaptation or specialized design. The Invisible Disability Project defines universal design as an approach to design that is meant to produce buildings, products, and environments that are accessible to virtually everyone without the need for adaptation or specialized design, regardless of ability or age. This approach should also be applied to OER creation. There are 7 core universal design principles, and like what I said before, they sound very similar to the POUR principles. The 7 principles were developed in 1997 by a working group led by Ron Mace, who I just mentioned. A thing that's important to know is that these 7 principles are just guiding principles. They're not laws. Principle 1, equitable use, is about creating a space or product that are useful to people with diverse abilities. Can users who have color blindness navigate and use your site if your site looks black and white to them? Principle 2, flexibility in use, is about providing users a choice in methods of use. We are not all the same. Some of us are right-handed, some of us are left-handed. Flexible design means designing spaces and objects to be used in various ways. Can your OER be navigated using a keyboard and not a mouse? Principle 3, simple and intuitive use. Something should be easy to understand how to navigate and use. This principle is about designing things which are easy to understand regardless of the experience, knowledge, command of language, or the current level of concentration of the user. Is the structure of your OER logical and easy to follow? Can users find the information they need easily? Principle 4, perceptible information. The design effectively communicates to the user. The design effectively communicates all information to the user, regardless of their sensory abilities or environmental conditions. Video captioning employs this principle. Principle 5, tolerance for error. This principle is about how design should eliminate or de-emphasize anything that could lead to issues during use. An undo feature in computer software that allows the users to correct mistakes is an example of this principle. Principle 6, low physical effort. The space or OER can be used comfortably and efficiently with a minimal level of fatigue. We don't want to tire our students out now, do we? And principle 7, size and space for approach and use. Every design must allow for adequate size, form, and ergonomics to approach, reach, manipulate, and use, regardless of the user's size, posture, and ability. An example is the text size of your OER large enough? Can people change it? Carly Spina, woman pictured here, wrote about universal design in libraries in her book, Creating Inclusive Libraries by Applying Universal Design. In her book, she discusses how the principles of universal design should be applied broadly. She argues that in the US, discussions of accessibility are usually focused on providing access for people with disabilities with a strong focus on meeting legal minimum requirements. And while I did mention legal requirements of the ADA and Title II updates at the beginning of this presentation, those are not the guiding force behind my belief in the importance of accessibility in OER. She says we should expand how we think about universal design and how universal design can be used to help reduce barriers to spaces, services, products, and make them welcoming to people with widely varied needs, not just people with disabilities. I agree and will add that universal design ideas can and should also be used when thinking about the creation of OER. Now we're going to talk about universal design for learning. A little bit different. Universal design for learning promotes equitable, flexible, and accessible learning by designing environments that reduce barriers and support diverse learners through multiple means of engagement, expression, and representation. Rather than viewing challenges as learner deficits, UDL focuses on proactive course design that enables all students, including those with disabilities or varied learning styles, to participate in rigorous, meaningful learning. While accommodations remain important, accessibility built into instruction from the start minimizes the need for individualized adjustments, and ensures all learners can succeed. UDL is about providing multiple means of engagement, multiple means of action and expression, and multiple means of representation. When we look at accessibility, universal design, and universal design for learning together, it's helpful to think about how each one shows up in practice rather than just how they're defined. Accessibility is what ensures that no one is shut out of using a resource. For example, adding captions, alternative text, or proper heading structure helps remove existing barriers for students who need those supports. Universal design takes a step back and asks us to design spaces, tools, and materials so that they work for as many people as possible from the beginning before barriers appear. This is the mindset behind things like intuitive navigation, flexible formats, and consistent layouts. Universal design for learning brings this same proactive thinking directly into teaching. UDL encourages offering multiple ways to engage with content, multiple ways to demonstrate learning, and multiple ways to access information. For OER, this might mean providing text, video, and images, creating flexible assignments, or allowing learners to choose how they show what they know. Together, these three concepts help us build OER that are usable, inclusive, and flexible, not just technically compliant, but built to support real learners with real needs from day one of your course. By prioritizing accessibility, inclusive pedagogies, and equity in the creation of OER, we can create a more just and inclusive environment, fostering engagement, supporting intellectual freedom, and broadening our world. Making education accessible for individuals with disabilities advances freedom for all groups of people. These universally designed teaching practices, while necessary to increase access for individuals with disabilities, are beneficial for all individuals, regardless of identity and status. Through my work as an accessibility librarian and an open educational resources developer, I've seen the practical implications of incorporating the ideas within the accessibility movement, universal design, and universal design for learning in the creation of OER. I think of accessibility and OER like the curb cut on a street. Originally seen as only a benefit to assist people who use wheelchairs, but in reality, it became a huge benefit to everyone. Just ask any person pushing a stroller, walking with a cane, or pulling luggage on wheels. By prioritizing accessibility, inclusive pedagogies, and equity in the creation of OER, we can create a more just and inclusive environment, fostering engagement, supporting intellectual freedom, and broadening our world. The belief in the human right to information. It's a big one. Tim Berners-Lee, generally credited as the inventor of the World Wide Web, has always emphasized that the true value of the web lies in its ability to expand opportunities to share knowledge. That idea aligns directly with the purpose of open educational resources. OER are built on the belief that knowledge should circulate freely, be accessible, and be available to everyone, not limited by cost, format, or barriers in design. When our OER are accessible, they don't just share information, they broaden who can learn, participate, and contribute. Accessibility expands the reach and impact of our work and makes the web's original promise of shared knowledge more fully realized. The worldwide OER movement is rooted in the belief that access to high-quality education is a human right. And this belief goes beyond reducing costs and providing openly licensed materials. At its core, OER is about participation, collaboration, and co-creation. As the OER Commons describes it, OER offer opportunities for systemic change in teaching and learning content through engaging educators in new participatory processes and effective technologies for engaging with learning. But OER cannot fulfill their promise of equity and participation unless they are accessible. Openness without accessibility still leaves people behind. The UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is an international human rights treaty that affirms the rights and dignity of people with disabilities. One of its key principles is recognizing that access to information and communication technologies, including the web, is a basic human right. This principle aligns directly with the goals of OER. If access to information is a human right, then the educational materials we create, share, and public must be designed so that everyone can use them. Accessibility becomes a necessary part of fulfilling that right, not just an optional enhancement. Remember at the beginning of this presentation, I talked about sonification? I learned about sonification by reading Dr. Wanda Diaz-Merced's essay, How a Blind Astronomer Found a Way to Listen to the Stars. In her essay, she talked about how access to information is empowering and should not be denied to people. In her essay, she said, information access empowers us to flourish. It gives us equal opportunities to display our talents and choose what we want to do with our lives, based on interest and not based on potential barriers. When we give people the opportunity to succeed without limits, that will lead to personal fulfillment and prospering life. I couldn't agree more. In their 2021 OER and Beyond blog post, Christina Clement, a student success librarian at the University of Wyoming Libraries, and Ksenia Chenman, manager of research for the Canadian School of Public Service, wrote, designing open educational resources, OER, with accessibility in mind is a gift of resiliency. It's a gift for those who have diverse needs, to learning professionals, excuse me, who wish to reuse your resources, and to your future self. Introducing accessibility considerations into your open learning resources is a commitment to resilience, to creating learning for all seasons of life. I wholeheartedly agree with them. And I especially appreciate that they mention how accessibility lessens barriers and makes it easier for our OER to be reused and remixed by the greatest amount of people. Marion Foley, a content designer who is partially sighted, has written about how personalized settings and accessible design makes it possible for her to work effectively. She emphasizes that accessibility doesn't have to be complicated. It simply requires intention from the beginning. When we approach OER creation with accessibility in mind from the outset, it becomes much easier to integrate those considerations into every step of the process. Accessibility isn't something to add on afterward. It's something to build on and in from the start. As Mariana puts it, when we build accessibility in from the beginning, we reach more people, and many will appreciate the effort. So what do I mean by OER accessibility? When you create or co-create OER, design them in ways that remove barriers that might prevent people from accessing or using your content. Accessibility is ultimately about removing obstacles from the start. As Stephanie Fenn-Flattery, a front-end engineer specializing in web accessibility, explains it, accessibility is the process of designing products and services for people who experience disabilities, and accessibility is removing barriers that might prevent people with disabilities from using those products and services. OER accessibility means building those principles into design from the beginning. So your materials are easy for everyone to use, share, adapt, and learn from the start date of your course. While most colleges and universities have disability services office, which can help remediate content to make it accessible for your students, say fix a PDF you have, we should all strive to create our OER to be fully accessible from the start so all students can begin the semester on the same footing. As a librarian, I've always been driven by the conviction that everyone deserves equitable access to information and knowledge. To provide such access to people, institutions must offer accessible, inclusive, and diverse content from various perspectives, using diverse delivery methods, recognizing that libraries and educational institutions are spaces where everyone should feel they belong and are welcomed and valued. This belief is rooted in my conviction that access to information is a basic human right. It's not just about providing resources, it's about creating an environment where everyone feels welcomed and supported. It means when selecting books to teach, you actively seek out diverse titles which reflect diverse perspectives, languages, and formats. It means when creating an OER, you make sure all students can access the information from day one without any barriers. It means when creating digital content, you consider the diverse physical needs of your users, making sure to take into consideration what will make a more inviting, inclusive, and accessible environment for everyone. In library school, at the UW-Madison where I went, I was taught to always ask, what are the physical and psychological costs to use the library? I asked myself that same question when thinking about OER. I help faculty to create. What are the physical and psychological costs to students to use this OER? What are the costs for fellow faculty to reuse and remix your OER? We never want to cause excess work for our students or fellow faculty. My goal when creating OER or any digital content is to provide accessible information with no barriers and to make everyone feel that they belong no matter what their circumstances. Teaching accessibility, inclusion, diversity, and equity, or taking accessibility, inclusion, diversity, and equity into consideration when creating your OER will only improve education for everyone. Accessibility is my why, because I believe access to information and education is a human right, not a privilege. The internet is the new, or not so new, public square where ideas, information, and education are taking place. OER are definitely part of this. OER are about building and sharing knowledge with as many people as possible. Accessibility is part of that mission and helps make sure your OER are usable by people of all abilities. Creating an accessible educational experience is a shared responsibility across an educational institution, and instructors have a special role to play to ensure that their OER courses are inclusive to all students. Accessible OERs provide opportunities to create flexible learning experiences for all students in and beyond the immediate course by contributing to shared knowledge online. As you know, open educational resources are different from regular teaching and learning materials. With OERs, you're allowed to retain, keep access to the materials after the learning event is done, reuse, use the contents in an unaltered form, revise, adapt, adjust, modify, improve, or alter the content, remix, combine, original or revised content within other OER to create something new, and redistribute. Share copies of original content, revisions, or remixes with others. By incorporating accessibility into the content of your OER, you allow for easier reuse, revising, remixing, and redistributing. As Christina and Kathina said before, designing open educational resources with accessibility is a gift to those who wish to reuse your resources. Remember, accessibility in OER is not about perfection. You are not striving for perfection. Accessibility isn't an all or nothing. It's progress, not perfection. As you go forward and attend more presentations and poster sessions today, think of ways to make progress when creating your OER. Inclusive design and accessibility in OER doesn't only benefit learners with disabilities. It expands flexibility, supports multilingual learners, non-traditional learners, and anyone accessing content in various environments. This month, choose one object in one OER, a single image, a single table, a single video, and make it accessible. Add alternative text, check for color contrast, use meaningful link text, add a transcript to your lecture videos. Small steps scale when we share openly. Because the internet is our public square and OER are one of its most generous acts, let's ensure everyone can enter. Be inspired, not deterred, by the chance to add accessibility to your OER. Thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed and are inspired by this presentation.
Thank you, Amy. Oh,
Oh, love all the heart.
oh,
You make me all feel so good. Thank you, everybody.
oh, and there was a comment says I was inspired.
Yay! That makes me
Oh,
so happy. That's really what my goal is. Just always be thinking about how we can just make everyone feel included. Because I know, like, when we become teachers and librarians in these fields, it's, to help people learn, and we don't want to create barriers. We want to give them access to information, and let them learn at their speed and what they want to learn about. And so if we can remove the barriers from the outset, then everyone can sort of learn at their own desired speed and what they want to learn about. And that's what really makes me happy.
oh, I love that. All right. So, everyone who's attending, feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A box. Amy, we do have one already there.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, it's a good one too.
Oh, hope I
How
can answer.
how does accessibility mesh with cover design? So this person is an open publishing specialist, and they are in charge of cover designs for the resources.
So you mean like the book, like a book cover?
I
Is
think
that what they mean?
so. I think so.
Well, so okay. So when you do images, you want to provide what's called alternative text, which is a way to describe an image and the purpose of the image, to someone who's using a screen reader. Or I don't know if you've ever been on a website and your data stream is not so good and everything is just words explaining what the the image is that you can't see. With cover design, so okay, when you would be, let's say, doing on a computer screen like the search icon, which is a magnifying glass, when you would describe that, you would say search, because that's what someone would be using it for, what the context is. But for a book cover, or let's say a fashion site or an art site, you want to describe what the image is so that the person can get an image in their mind as to what it is. So maybe you could, and that also then helps you sort of think about like why you picked the design you did to begin with for the book. Like what was the reasoning behind you picked those colors or that image? What were you trying to convey with those images? And if you don't want it to be too long. But again, if it's like I helped someone do an art website, and it was important for the pictures to sort of tell people like this was oil on canvas with that's using yellow and green, sort of more details than just saying Vincent van Gogh. So I would say you want to put into words what the image is and why you chose it for the book and how it represents what you're trying to teach within the book.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So our next one, it says it doesn't just have to be Professor Wolfe answering, but maybe a general audience question. But what sort of issues or problems have you had with making OER you use and or create accessible?
I would love to hear what people's thoughts are on that.
Yes. So I would say, yeah, let's answer this one in the chat. So in anyone who uses or creates OER, what issues or problems have you had making those accessible? And just to put a spin on that for you, Amy, what kind of questions do you normally get from faculty or librarians in this area? Like what kind of major concerns do you see?
Well, I know one of the big issues, and I'm sure everyone will be shaking their heads with this in agreement, is our PDFs. For the longest time, we were all told to use PDFs, create PDFs, great, yay. But PDFs have such issues, not just if you don't scan a PDF correctly, if you don't create it correctly, just it can be like just an image. So when you try to search for the text on the page, a screen reader or your computer will be like, it's an image. They see none of the text. So that can be a first sort of issue. But also, I can just tell you as a student, when I've gone to classes, I mean, I love me some faculty, don't get me wrong, but some faculty, do not know how to copy things, and the paper's all askew. Half of it, the book, you can't see, in the little part in between. And so you're trying to read what is it that they're trying to say, and I can see visually. But a screen reader, if it's very hard to read those things. And also, one of the weird things that I didn't know until I started learning about accessibility was sometimes when you have a document that's a PDF that you've scanned that has columns, I know to read one, then two, but the screen reader reads across. And so it jumps. And so that really makes no sense than if you're a student trying to figure out where you are. So I would say PDFs. Um, and also just sort of teaching people that a lot of the things, especially if you can visually see, a professor will make a page or do something and they bold things, their headings, they bold them, they make them a fun color, and they're like, everyone can tell that that's a heading. And I'm like, unless when you are creating the site or styling and tell it that that's a header, the screen readers don't pull that out. And one of the great things about screen readers is that, and other assistive technologies, is you can tell it to pull out all the headers so people can figure out where they want to go, or to pull out like all of the links so they know where to go. So yeah, don't make your links say here, click here, click here, click here, because like the whole page just screams out click here, click here, click here, and gives people no idea what they're talking about. So those would be my sort of things. But I'm curious to hear what people said in the chat.
Yes, there's been several. Someone mentioned tables in press books, so making those tables accessible. Alt text. Yes, someone also mentioned PDFs. Oh, yes, and the importance of having the paid Adobe license to help with that for PDF accessibility. Yes, that, and I don't know if you all have looked at that cost for the paid Adobe license, but I think I finally canceled mine because it was like $18 a month, and I was like, I can't. That's
I got very mad. I think that that is so a terrible thing about the Adobe, because I've been doing a lot of work from home remotely, so I had to get them to sort of put the specific licenses before we were doing a lot of cloud stuff on my computer at home. And I was like, why is doing an accessibility checker? Why is that an extra paid on thing? That should be in the free version. I think that is just such bad business practice and is so limiting. It's sort of like, well, if you can afford it, you can make stuff accessible. But if not, and I think that that's really unfortunate.
yes, yeah, I agree. Someone did say that Census Access helps with this. It's a software where you can upload a file and convert it into a more accessible format. I've not heard of Census Access before, but y'all, it might be worth exploring. I don't know. Yeah. Okay, we have one question left so far in the Q&A. What advice would you give libraries who want to encourage, oh gosh, resource vendors to improve accessibility compliance?
Well, so first, now while I was talking about like how we don't want to just do all of this because of legal requirements, we want to do it for more ethical reasons. The law does help when dealing with vendors because you will not purchase from them because if their stuff is not accessible. As a institution, you can't just now be throwing up stuff. But that does have a slight caveat. Certain databases or certain programs, like sort of archival stuff, sometimes can't necessarily, all of it can't be made accessible, like, databases on that. The thing I would suggest is one, hopefully, though, again, if it's a sort of a smaller vendor, this might, they might not have as much, reach out to the vendor, which I've done, and find out, do you have an accessibility office or team that's working on making sure that your stuff is accessible? You can ask them for this thing called a VPAT, which is a vendor produced accessibility template. I think that that's what those letters mean. And that's them sort of going through their databases and telling you against a bunch of sort of criteria that are set. If they meet it, if they meet it with conditions or they don't meet it. And then you can use that as a jumping off point. I've sometimes, I've looked through their VPATs and said like, so when are you going to be fixing this? That you said is an issue. And also just as a caveat, remember they create the VPAT. So, if you can have internal testing in your own institution to test, not that they're lying, but it's always helpful if you can test it yourself. I've also, sometimes I found, especially if they have an accessibility person, um, when you bring up concerns or ideas, sometimes they haven't thought of them because sometimes they don't really, they don't see the day to day how our students are using a database or something. And so we can say like, oh yeah, our students are doing X, Y, Z. Can this be made accessible? And they'll be like, oh, I hadn't even really thought about that. Um, and I would also say just, sometimes you can offer them stuff, though they won't do it. Sometimes one of my colleagues at one of the CUNY campuses has been going through some PDFs that are in databases that say they're accessible, and they pretty much are, but they really go through them to make sure all the headings are correct. They go through the tags, which is like very detailed remediation. And sometimes so they want to fix some of the content, the PDF that's in a database. And they then they've then offered, they've been like, so we fix this PDF so it's like really A++ accessible, and they would love to like actually send it back to the vendor and be like, could you replace the one you have with this new one? And the vendors sometimes are like, can't do that, and it's like, oh well, but then we at least got them to agree, certain of them, to allow us to use those PDFs in replace of, like, for electronic reserves, because I'm not sure if at your institutions, but I know here at CUNY, a lot of our contracts and stuff, if you find a PDF in a database, they want you to link to the database, so you have to log in. They don't want you to just to download the PDF and then upload the PDF, which also is kind of a good thing to not just upload it, because then you don't get usage counts, which, everyone knows who tries to get a budget, you need to sort of show that people have been using the database. But because of sometimes when a lot of vendors will tell you, we just create the platform, our content is given to us by the other people create the content, and we can't, just, assure its accessibility. So we've gotten permissions sometimes that you have to make sure to do that with them, because, they love their contracts, that we could then upload the PDF on electronic reserves for students that don't necessarily need all of them to like log in or different things like that, or for an OER, because we want it to be more. But I would also just say, like, talk to them. And if you can't find their accessibility person, because sometimes, it's hard to figure out who's who in some of these vendors, reach out to the people who are trying to sell you. Sell you the database, and reach out to them and say like, hi, we really love this and we'd love to talk to you more about this, but we have these questions. And they will, because they really want to sell you the database and have you sign that contract, they will, if they're smart, will look out and talk to, find out the person. And if you're part of a consortium, it's always good to sort of say, our whole group here, like, we really, we have to justify this $100,000 that you want us to spend on this database, and this is an issue. And I'd also just add, though they don't necessarily do this sort of stuff as a librarian, and as a person in behind the scenes, sometimes one of my frustrations is a lot of databases or resources or these platforms, they, concentrate, which is important, on the user, people out, our students and stuff. But, we are also humans who put the stuff together. We go through the database, interface from behind the scenes, setting up how it works, how it doesn't work. And, you know, shocking, there are librarians who use screen readers. There are librarians who, who use the keyboard and not a mouse, so it's sort of frustrating when the forward facing side is accessible, but they don't make the behind the scenes accessible. It's sort of like, include everybody everywhere all at once, to quote that movie.
That is great. Thank you. Yeah, that was some really good steps. So we did have two more questions that came
Okay.
in. Do you have experience working with computer science material? This person teaches a programming class, and most of the material they use are code scripts that students have to toy with and produce plots and figures with it.
I haven't myself done a lot of that stuff, but there is ways to make accessible STEM, math, computer, and codes and formulas accessible. There's a thing called LaTeX, um, and different programs that um, describe what those things are for people using screen readers or other assistive technologies. Because I know that's a thing a lot of like math teachers or people would like, take a picture and put up a formula on the screen. And I'm like, I can't help you with that because I don't know what any of those things are. And I don't know how to read it. I don't know if it's up, down, but I know that with a lot of, hopefully in a lot of the new schools where they're teaching, math and all those sort of things, they're trying to teach them how to use those programs. So LaTeX is one of them. And I would suggest just searching online, maybe LinkedIn, or on the internet, and try and do something like STEM accessibility and see who comes up and the things that they're talking about. And you'll also, hey, we'll find there are OER on that. So hopefully you could already find people who have put together OER on STEM and accessibility, and you could learn from them or reach out to them also and ask how to do that. And I think that's a great question because I always, we want to, just like the woman who's the astronomer, and data sonification. I was like, that is fabulous. I mean, so there are ways, there are definitely ways.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we had another one come in. What would you recommend if the OER I'm using is inaccessible? Say it's in Pressbooks and our institution doesn't have a Pressbooks license.
So, well, so if it's, so you're using OER, so you're using the Pressbooks that you're able, well, most Pressbooks, if you set it up right, you can download. If the person who created it, has various ways you can download. So even if you don't have a Pressbooks instance, you should be able to download it but depends also on what form. They may have set it up that you can only download it as a PDF. I would say, if the item is an OER one, see about reaching out to the author and ask them if they might have a non-Pressbook version. Maybe they created it in Word or something that they would be willing to send to you, or maybe they could update their thing so you could download it as an EPUB or HTML. I would say also, you could try and see if you could search for an accessible or a remixed version of that OER that someone's created that is accessible. I was helping a professor doing a biology 1010, and they were like taking from like 3 different biology courses, and they're very detailed, like they want to change like very specific certain words. And I'm like, okay, like really? Alrighty. But so we're going like page by page by page, and just sort of making theirs sort of more accessible as we go through the process. But yet, if it's an OER, I say reach out to the author or the school if the person's not at that institution anymore or wherever, and ask them, do you have something you could send to me? Because I love your OER and I want to reuse it, but it's not accessible. That would be my suggestion.
No, that's great. That's a great suggestion. I mean, sometimes it's the little things that I'm like, oh yeah, that's perfect. Reach out to the author. I don't know how many times I've told students that on certain things too. And so, yeah, and it looks like there's folks in the chat that are like also offering different tools and a lot of things. So that's great. Y'all check out the chat if you haven't.
Hey.
So I do have another question.
Okay.
So if someone is just starting to think about accessibility in OER, what would be the first small change they can make that you think would have the biggest impact?
Oh, well, first, just thinking about it is awesome, and having it front of mind is a great thing. I would say, first of all, since there's a lot of content, besides just things like my guide, there are books and other things on accessibility. A lot of what I learned was sort of self-taught and from things that people have been sharing to learn from. I would say, if you're making an OER, from the beginning, like what's sort of an initial few things to do, which you might be also learning about later on if you go to the session at 2 o'clock on Accessibility 101, is things like be consistent, first of all, in what you're using, how you lay out your site or your book. I would say make sure your colors are good. There are a lot of color contrast testers that can check to make sure that the contrast is good enough that people who are colorblind or have other visual issues can sort of see what you have. Because some colors combinations that we all think look fabulous are really like not that great for certain people. I would say also when you're doing links, this is sort of my thing. If you're putting like links to readings, one, just as a librarian, put some information besides just the link. Let people try and sort of like little breadcrumbs. It doesn't have to be perfect, like, MLA, APA citation style or anything, but give people some info. Because sometimes, your link ends up not being good anymore. And so you want people to be able to try and figure out where it came from. But the thing I sort of say is to make it have like sort of meaningful text. And sometimes that requires you to maybe sort of rewrite the paragraph that you were writing because you wrote a great one and it was just like click here. But you really, that's not good. So to make the links have like that they're meaningful, that if the person just pulled them all onto a page and all they could see was the link, what is the text? What are you calling them? Like I was saying before, you don't want just everything that says click here, click here, click here, because it's not telling anybody where they're going. And then just one thing that I always try and do, though technology doesn't let you sort of do that all the time. If you look on this page, on my last page where it says my LinkedIn URL, I try to make that like usually I would, since I knew you would know that was me, I didn't sort of put meaningful text there. But let's say I did, and it was like Amy Wolfe's LinkedIn. Then I like to put the actual raw URL there so people can look at it. Again, sometimes if a link goes bad, you can kind of read the URL and try and figure out where to go. But a screen reader, if a link is the like sort of pure raw URL, it will read out to people HTTPS semicolon / www dot, and like that's awful. And like imagine like a whole bibliography like that. So the thing I try and do is I try and code make the font for the URLs, the actual URLs like that, the raw ones, not actually clickable, and to actually say it's source code so that the user on the screen reader, they'll know it's a code and they can choose to read it or not, but it doesn't just read it out to them as all of the links. But I would say color, meaningful text for your links, really name them so people can know what they are. And alternative text, if you're using images, and it's okay to use images that are just decorative. You don't need to describe them. It's okay to say they're just decorative. And I guess I would just say, don't shy away from using color or pictures just to make something accessible. We don't want, making things colorful or have images is also accessible. It makes it more interesting and engaging for people. So you don't want to limit that. As you could tell from my presentation, I'm a big fan of the pictures. That's what keeps me happy when I'm doing my work. So you don't want to limit that. And you also this is what was always a hard one for me when I was doing this, is always you don't want to say a picture of or an image of, because the screen readers, it tells them that. So you would be saying it says image, an image of. So they already know it's an image. So you just sort of describe it. So those, I guess, would be sort of my things I would say. And just, again, it's great for you to beginning to think about it and just, pick one sort of thing as you go forward and just try and do that and remember that as you're working on your stuff. Yeah, those would be my suggestions.
Oh, that is wonderful. That is wonderful. In closing, what gives you the most hope right now in terms of accessibility, OER, both, either one? Like, what gives you the most hope in this area?
Um, I would say other people who are doing the work. I like reaching out to colleagues, to you all, reaching out to me. Some of the presenters will know that the minute I got on, was called for this conference, I like looked you all up on LinkedIn and tried to friend you, so that I can sort of see what you all are doing and talking about to connect that way. Um, yeah, especially also with OER, I search out lots of different OERs, all over the place. I've learned a lot from people from New Zealand, and the UK. I find just like, oh, that's really interesting, accessibility information that they have out there. So I would say people, reach out to others. If on your campus you have a disability services office, reach out to them. If you have a teaching and learning office, reach out to them. Some of these, not the disability, but the teaching learning, maybe some of them you'll realize they are just trying to initially learn about the stuff. And so you could help teach them or learn with them. I would say go to these sort of conferences. And there are like trainings that are some vendors, yes, they're trying to sell you some stuff. And so like part of their training at the end might be like, buy our thing, but they don't force you to do that. And so you can go to a training, from some vendor that's talking about captioning and learn about captioning, sort of what they tell you, what they're talking about, the issues, and use it for yourself without then buying the product. Um, so I do that a lot. I was just yesterday at am I pronouncing it right? An ISKME webinar. I was like, oh, interesting. And I'm going to one coming up on like from Vengage. I'm on I get these emails and I'm like, oh, okay. Let me listen and learn what they're sort of talking about because they have, the people in their like the databases, or like I went to an EBSCO uh seminar on accessibility, and they talked about things that I thought was really interesting that I thought about, but I don't necessarily have to buy the EBSCO product. So that's how I've done a lot of my learning.
That is great. Well, I don't think there's any other questions that have come in.
This has been
Oh,
great.
I mean, the whole committee appreciates you for
Okay.
giving our keynote today. I appreciate all the attendees that are here as well. Oh, yes, you're getting, oh, someone says you rock, Amy.
Oh, yay. Thank you
Yes.
so much.
Wow.
And everyone, please, if anyone wants to reach out to me, I've got all my info there on the screen. Please reach out to me. I'd love to talk to anybody and share ideas and get information from you all too. Like I said, we all learn from each other.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, I've already learned so much more today and I just appreciate it. And you all, we can continue this conversation. We do have the 2 o'clock session. There are poster sessions that you can attend at any time. Those are all asynchronous. But yes, Amy, thank you so very, very much.
Thank
It's been
you.
great.
Yay.
All right.
All righty.
All right, Amy, I'll be in touch.
Yes, great. Everyone have a great rest of your conference.